This is a GCSE Biology presentation on photosynthesis. To get started, think of everything you can remember from plant biology at Key Stage 3. So pause the video, get yourself some paper, and scribble down anything and everything you can remember about plants. When you're ready, you can restart the video. So pause the video now. So what we're going to look at now is move away from the flowering plants and reproduction of plants. We're going to look at a process called photosynthesis. And as part of that process, there's a couple of chemical tests we need to know, which is the test for oxygen and the test for starch. And in photosynthesis, plants produce a substance called glucose. You also need to be able to describe what that glucose is used for or is stored as. Basic equation for photosynthesis. Have a look at the statement at the top, see if you can work out the pictures and put the correct words into the correct formula. Pause the video, have a go at completing the formula, and then you can restart whenever you're ready. So to start with, we have a carbon dioxide fire extinguisher. So we start with carbon dioxide. We have a glass of water. We have the overhead lockers in an airplane contain masks that drop down in an emergency, which will supply you with oxygen. And of course, the last thing is just a sweet, which is made from sugar in the form of glucose. Pause the video again this time and try and do the chemical formula, but try and balance the equation. The chemical formulas are given to you in the question. So CO2H2O, C6H12O6 is glucose. Please make sure you memorize that. And oxygen is O2. What you then need to do is either A, using a method to balance the equations, or B, simply memorize this particular balanced chemical formula. To balance this chemical formula, you simply have to remember the statement that science is evil and put a 6 in front of all the small chemical formulas. So a large 6 in front of the CO2, a large 6 in front of the H2O, and a large 6 in front of the O2. And that's the balanced chemical formula. So photosynthesis as a process is what we call endothermic. That means it absorbs energy from the environment for the chemical reaction to happen. In particular, for photosynthesis, we talk about the absorption of sunlight energy. Now, to absorb sunlight energy, the plants need a particular substance, and that chemical is called chlorophyll. It's what makes plants green. Chlorophyll is found inside a particular structure inside each of the plant cells called chloroplasts. If you go back through one of the other presentations on structures of cells, you get more information on chloroplasts if you need it. As chlorophyll absorbs sunlight energy, it means that photosynthesis is endothermic. You also need to be aware of the different layers in the cross section of a leaf. And if you notice, looking at the picture in the bottom right hand corner, the top layer, called the palisade mesophyll, are orientated so that they can absorb the most sunlight energy, and they have the most chloroplasts. They've got large numbers of chloroplasts in order to absorb the most sunlight energy. If you notice, the upper epidermis, which is the layer at the top, does not have any chloroplasts and therefore will not absorb any sunlight energy. And if it doesn't absorb sunlight energy, photosynthesis cannot happen. So how do the materials get in and out of a plant? Well, you need to memorize this off by heart. We've got carbon dioxide, which goes from the atmosphere through stomata by diffusion into a leaf. Water, which is from the soil by osmosis to the root, through the xylem and the stem and into the leaf. Oxygen does the reverse of carbon dioxide. So we start in a leaf, it goes through the stomata by diffusion into the atmosphere. And the glucose, well, there's a number of different things that can happen to the glucose that we're going to look at. So the glucose can be used for a number of different things. For example, respiration, which is another chemical process that's carried out by all living things that results in the release of energy. Remember, respiration is not breathing. It's a chemical reaction and it results in the release of energy. Plants can also use the glucose to make a substance called cellulose, and that cellulose is used to build cell walls. We also can make amino acids, and amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. We can also store that glucose, and if the glucose is stored, it is stored in one of two ways. It is stored as lipids, which are fats and oils, or it is stored as starch because it's insoluble. We mentioned at the start, there are two chemical tests you need to be aware of in relation to photosynthesis. You've got a starch test, which turns from a brown orange color to a dark blue black if starch is present, and that's requires iodine. So iodine goes from brown orange to dark blue black. You need to be able to name the chemical that you need, iodine, and the color you start with and the color you end with. The second test you need to do is if we collect gas that's given off during photosynthesis, it will be high in oxygen. So the oxygen test is that we take a splint and we blow it out so that it's still glowing red, but there's no flame. And that's called a glowing splint. We then put the glowing splint into a tube of gas collected from a plant, and if there's oxygen in that tube, that glowing splint will relight. And that's the test for oxygen. Last thing you've got to do is look into all the different terminologies that we've covered in the lesson, is create a spider web and show connections between the different words. So when you connect two words up on the line, connecting them up on your spider web, you've got to identify what the connection is.